Good morning and happy Democracy Day. Today is June 12th, of course. I'm Makinde. Good morning and welcome to the program.
You know, the president kept talking about independence, sort of, and I was going to say Happy Independence Day anyway, but this is Sunrise Daily Democracy Day edition. Welcome to the show. I'm Kaido Kikulu.
And it's significant that the president counted 30 years. It's been 30 years since that historic day, and we're glad to be part of history on the 30th year this morning. Good morning and welcome. I am Bukola Koka.
A host of journalists who are live and active on June 12, 1993. I wonder what memories they have right now of that day, because, hey, it's been an amazing, set of days, weeks, and months for us in Nigeria. And every year we've commemorated it, so to speak, especially since 1999, and that agitation for it to be recognized as a national holiday, Democracy Day, as opposed to May 29. I think it is quite, something quite significant that it's not just the federal government that made the sacrifice. It was Nigerians
that made the sacrifice
of that day.
Indeed.
I'm sure you understand why I said it's, I feel like part of history, because I know where I was in 1993. I was somewhere in a boarding house. So I'm here as a journalist today. So it feels pretty good.
Absolutely. Welcome to the show. Share with us your experience. Where were you that day? What do you remember about it? And 30 years after, what has been the experience? Of course, those handles will be right there on your screen. Welcome to the show once again. Let's get started.
All right, straight away, let's get into the conversation we have with us here this morning. Professor Ademola Abass, who is a professor of international law. He's also a global affairs analyst. He's former special advisor to a Lagos State governor on overseas affairs and investment. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I'm going to ask you, Kyle, this question. Where were you on June 12, 1993?
I saw that comment. I think I was a student in the University of Lagos. Then I was studying law. Yes, I think I was in the University of Lagos at that point in time. Yeah.
That annulment, how did it come to you?
Well, it was a shock. I mean, to all Nigerians, not only me, obviously. It was a great shock because of the fact that, almost half of the results had been declared at that point in time, and Chief Abiola had won literally across the country, and it was adjudged then, and I'm happy that the president referred to that at that point in time as probably the freest and the fairest election we ever held in the country. So it was a brutal shock, but anybody who then understood the antics of Ibrahim Babangida wouldn't be totally knuckled down when that came, because it was sort of, I think the country got used to is rather diabolical means of playing politics and playing with the lives and toys with the life of the people. So from that point of view, I think in a way one was a little cautiously prepared, not prepared for annulment. I mean, Babangida enriched our vocabularies beyond any other Nigerian leader, to step aside, annulment, chairperson, and so many things and that came to light at that point. We have to be grateful to him for doing that kind of a lexicographical free of charge for that matter. But in terms of, doing that for the people, I think it was gut-wrenching.
Still talking about the former military president, he put out a statement recently and saying that, look, as Nigerians, we haven't really taken full advantage, exploited the advantages or the benefits or the ideals of that freest and fairest election of our lives. What do you think he had in mind?
Well, the devil knows not the intent of a man's mind, especially Abibi's mind. I'm sure if you put two devils there, they won't be able to navigate it. But what is important, if you move beyond the messenger and you focus on the message, there is a bit of truism in what he said that we've not really sort of grappled with the lessons of that particular moment. And I'm happy you mentioned the ideals of democracy, which the president himself referred to when he was talking about the martyrdom of Chief M.K. Abiola, who he, appropriately referenced that he actually had a choice to abandon his mandate, but he chose not to choose the easier option, eventually sacrificing or losing his life at that point in time. And when the president was speaking, I was listening. When he was talking about the ideals of democracy, anybody who's a student of history will immediately remember that was one of the high points of Mandela's statements when he said the ideals of democracy are the ideals I wish to live by. If needs be, they are the ideals for which I am prepared to die. And I just think Chief M.K. Abiola sort of conceptualized that and animated that embodied that kind of concept. When for Nigerians, I think, as I said, we have to look beyond the messenger, which is IBB, because if you are saying we haven't grappled with that, it's a bit of ironical.
So let's focus on the ideals, on the message.
Yeah. Precisely, that's what I'm saying. Look at the message. We haven't, to the extent that you will have thought that since 1999 we ought to have moved beyond where we are today. But the truth is, and I always remind people of that, look, let us be very cautious before we put ourselves down. And I keep telling people, we are not making excuses, but we are trying to explain sometimes why we find ourselves where we are today. I just came back from a trip to Europe, and I was talking to some people, and they were saying, oh, Nigeria should have been. I said, look, slow down. We are not making excuses, but the truth is, when you're dealing with a country as heterogeneous as Nigeria, over 250 communities in the country, when you are dealing with different tribal groups, different religions, different this, different that, then, we came back from a history of slavery to colonialism to neo-colonial wahala here and there. Cut some slack. We are just how many years in independence? I am not saying we have to reinvent all the mistakes made by other countries, but every country, one way or the other, must learn its own lessons, must go through that rigmarole of history, one way or the other. So all those things that we should have learned, yes, we have technology today, we have examples to learn from. We are not probably moving as fast as we should have been doing, but again, we cannot beat ourselves too hard for going that. We are just hoping that, the present democratic tenets we have, hopefully, will begin to open new vistas of true democracy in the Nigerian polity.
It's interesting you use the word hope, and of course that is really significant to this day, 30 years ago, but it's also quite interesting as you were speaking. I recall that the president has visited the former head of state, Ibrahim Babangida, not once, and over the course of just even 2 years, he's visited him time and again. And you see in that statement, it was referring to the military, dictatorship, tyranny, how it degrades, it humiliates, but still we see that sort of handshake, as it were, between the military era, which he describes in those words, and the democracy, which we say, well, is way better. So what do you make of that handshake of sorts? Is it like a necessary evil?
Kadi, I like that particular phrase, the word you used there. Handshake. We talk about the handshake across Niger, but I think the first time I'm hearing handshake between civilians and military, that is commendable. Look, you're absolutely right. We cannot lose sight of the significance of that. Whenever people talk about military still dominating Nigerian politics and this and that, I keep on telling them that look, we have consistently made one mistake in Nigeria, and that is the mistake of thinking we can be governed by people in uniform for so many years, and suddenly we landed ourselves in democracy in 1999, and then you expect the same military that has been so used to their own ways and orders to start taking orders or backseat from the civilians. There's something they call a transformation. There's an institution I'll come to in Switzerland called DICAF. It's Democratic Control of Armed Forces. You have to take deliberate steps to reprocess your armed forces, especially when they have been tainted by political offices. You have to reprocess them. You have to remanufacture them to be civilian compliant. We haven't done that in Nigeria. We're just thinking we can wake up one day and by miracle or magic, the same person who has been... Look, anybody today who is over 40, 50 years old, including me in Nigeria, was not used to people debating. We never watch our parliamentarians debating in this. So, and that's why Nigerians somehow we are quite agitated when we argue. We never learn the tenets of, debates.
That's very significant. My apologies. Yeah. So you're saying essentially that even the civilians themselves, beyond the military transition, the civilians themselves need to transit.
Precisely. We need to transit, but I'm saying it must start first and foremost because we're talking about democracy now of civilians now. We need to transform first our military institution. And because we haven't done that, there is always an unspoken fear in the mind of the political class that unless we get the buy-in of the military establishment, albeit they are no longer in physical power, especially those that have controlled the countries for numerous years, whether you are Bubakar, whether you are IBB, whether you are these, unless you have their buy-in, there is a kind of deep-seated fear that things might not all go well the way that you want to. And I think that still comes from the fact that, we have not really done that transformation of the military and put them, just as an example, there was a debate about a week ago when they were talking about who should be your NSA, Nigerian National Security Advisor. And I was reading the newspapers, and somebody, I think the military came out, I don't know who of them, whether it's the CDS or whoever, who came out and said, oh, whoever is going to be the NSA must be somebody in uniform, must be an armed forces person. Otherwise, what is important was the rationale for that statement. And the gentleman said, otherwise the person might not be respected by the military and by the armed forces. Immediately, that democratic control of armed forces came to my mind. In the U.S., all the NSAs in the U.S. are civilians. Condoleezza Rice, John Bolton, all of them are civilians. If you are appointed by the commander-in-chief of armed forces of a country who is a civilian, how can you say you not respect that NSA simply because it doesn't come from the armed forces?
And to move on that wavelength, is it significant that, with the end of the Muhammadu Buhari administration, that we have, drawn the curtain on the old guard, of the military regime? He was a former general, in a democratic dispensation. Now we have somebody whose democratic credentials, unchallenged, they are evident. We still refer to his participation in NADECO during the June 12th. So is that the end of the old guard and a new era, when you consider that, in fact, in his speech this morning, he referred to Nigerians as fellow compatriots? So is this significant of what is to come?
Look, as they say, futurology is always problematic. I wish I could say, honestly, yes. But obviously, we'll be fooling ourselves here if we say automatically yes. The current government will be in power for 4 years or 8 years, whenever. But whenever the mandate of this current administration terminates, we don't know what comes next. I'm not saying the military are going to plan coup and come back, but to answer your question is that you must still see a general coming up and saying they want to run for election, and there's nothing stopping an ex-military personality from running an election. So from that point of view, I don't think I'm necessarily going to be worried if, for instance, tomorrow a former military head of state or a military whatsoever comes up and say, I want to run. They have their democratic right to contest elections in Nigeria. But what is important, as I was saying earlier on, is that once they come within the democratic foray, they are civilians. They must play by democratic rules and tenets. And that is what is still missing until the Nigerian government, and I hope that we can begin to take that steps now, recognizes that, look, we need to reformat our military personnel to be able to comply with democratic tenets, and we are going to be playing with fire at the end of the day.
It's quite interesting. I didn't catch that part, where someone was recommending a military, person for NSA. But now that it looks like that term handshake will become a thing now in our conversation. Now that we have identified that indeed there is that sort of handshake, and we don't know how long it will last for. If you were to rate Nigeria's democracy right now, how would you rate it? What percentage are we in practicing, to say, true democracy right now with that sort of handshake we have seen? Could you rate us maybe 1 to 100?
Well, 1 to 100, when you look across the globe, because we have to have a context to these. If you look across Africa, we might rate ourselves that probably we're operating within Africa continent, maybe 60% or thereabout. But if you look across globe, especially those who gave us democracy, so to say, and even if you look within Africa itself, let's go historical here. If you look within Africa, I know when you go to Southeast as an example, they are more acephalous in those days. But when you come to Southwest, I'm just in pre-colonial context. We used to be very, very democratic in Southwest under the Oyo Empire. You had the Oyo Mesi, the checks and balances in some of our kingdoms, and I'm sure they are there in the Northern Kingdom, in different kingdom, in the Benin Kingdom and co. The kind of checks and balances we had in those days, actually they dwarf what we have today. So what I'm saying is that if you were to measure, to gauge our democracy today by any barometer, whether by the Western democracies that we seem to have taken all the formal ones from, or by the ones we practiced, our monarchy, the one practiced in the pre-colonial time, I think we are probably operating about 30 or 40%. To be honest with you, I mean, that is just my own fair assessment.
That's poor assessment.
Well, that is, I would say, well, I don't want to use pass, fail, or poor, but I'd rather say it's a work in progress assessment. You know, I would think I'll hovers up between 35 and 40. You know, when I'm an academic.
Exactly, I was going to say that. So you know this.
I'm an academic. When you grade a student and they score 35, 40, 40 is usually sort of a reasonable pass mark before you get to the average. You think in 35, 40, you know, if they'd made a bit of more effort, they could have landed in 40, where some kind of level of seriousness. And that is where I'm seeing us now. That for better or for worse, we've fumbled, we've fallen, we've risen, we've done, which is commendable since 1999. That at least we have stayed with our democracy. Nobody should be deluded. Democracies are never born in a single day. It's a lot of work. Well, democracies don't start and end with elections or winning elections.
I wonder if it is enough, you know, to commend ourselves for staying in democracy. And, you know, from here, I'd like us to also review again the lessons of June 12. You know, if you consider that, according to history, it is said that, you know, the problem was not particularly the North. I'm talking about this in terms of the unity of the country now, you know, considering the fact that the former military president annulled the primaries that saw the emergence of two Northern candidates, and that, you know, what happened, what transpired for June 12, you know, with the annulment of MK Abiola's election victory, was really what transpired between two generals. So if we consider that from that point, we've replicated our own Muslim ticket with the inability to replicate that victory that MK Abiola recorded across the country at that time, what lessons have we really learned in terms of the unity, you know, that handshake across the Niger, from the west, from the south to the north?
Well, that's a very important question. Look, Nigeria is a very fractured society. Let's kid ourselves. I think what we need to start focusing seriously now is how to rebuild this nation. More often than not, when we talk about Nigeria problem, this and that solutions, we don't even take time to actually identify our problems first. We think because now we have a new government, then solutions will just come automatically. No, we have to take a step back. And it's a very important question you asked in terms of the annulment, in terms of we've not been able to replicate the victory, by which I think you meant the kind of cross-country kind of victory, acceptance which we saw in Chief MK Abiola. I think probably the only person, you know, at that point in time that was so widely accepted. But I think, you know, 1993 was a watershed in Nigerian politics for so many reasons. And I'm happy you mentioned that it wasn't a problem of the North. Because part of our problems also, and I think I said that here sometime when these elections that brought in the current government, I was there a few times, and I did mention the fact that Nigeria suffers from a terrible trust deficit. And because of that, we are very suspicious of one another now. And that suspicion began long before 1993, but actually was accentuated in 1993 when a general, you know, decided to annul the legislation, judged to be freest and fairest in the country at that point in time. You don't wake up when a human being makes a mistake. It might take maybe 2 days, 3 days when you are spoken to and you are shown how to correct. But when a nation makes a mistake, it could take decades before you fix it. And I think that is what we are facing today. How we are going to be able to amend that, we need a lot of creativity and imagination. But unfortunately, that is one thing that has been lacking brutally in Nigerian leadership, at least up to this particular point.
Perhaps one of the challenges we have here, I mean, following up on that, which you said, and Bukola's question, is that of the power play. You spoke to that. We're talking about our democracy, and you clearly made it clear that, look, we have a lot of work to do on our democracy. But there is always some, how do I put this, puppet masters, so to speak, who act behind the scene. There are those who say, you know, that the June 12 annulment didn't just happen. It was something orchestrated by political, you know, players, major political players who spoke to the ears of the military president at the time. If you would look at that time and look at now, because what happened at that time was a coup against democracy, so to speak, in that, you know, many Nigerians came out. 5 million Nigerians came out, voted for one person, but 3 million Nigerians came out and voted for the other person. It was a two-party system. Now, looking at that, what the play that happened at that time, that truncated that democracy at the time, and now, we're 23 years now? 24 years into our democratic practice now, we still have a situation where, as you said, some would say we're crawling in our democratic development. These powers behind the scene, how significant are they? How vulnerable is the president or the head of government at any given point in time to these things, so that people will understand that the president or the governor or whoever it is needs a lot of support, and the people who mill around them need to be, there needs to be an entry process of sorts.
You know, I'm smiling because that's a very important question. If you remember, it's important because you said something. Your question was double-pronged. You said, how significant are those shadowy powers are, but more importantly, how vulnerable is the president dealing with those powers? It's a very important question. And I said in one of my appearances here, during the elections itself, last election, and I said something. You did ask me the question whether it was you or Laulu, who asked me the question of the three candidates, who will I be rooting for? And my answer was, for me, the president I was looking for at that point in time was, number one, somebody who will harness the best resources in the country, the best talent in the country. And then number two is somebody that when all political pressures come, as they will come, who has got the stamina to withstand this pressure, the stamina and the experiences. And clearly you figured out who I was. And I mentioned you, and I think the killer question then came when you asked me that in terms of consistency, and of the three candidates, I told you point blank, Ademola I mentioned was the most consistent because he's moved from ACN to AC to APC, never really cross-carpeted from one party to another, which was a fact anyway. But anyway, so, and I'm relating that back to the question now, that first, how powerful, how important are those shadowy powers? They're always going to be, not only in Nigeria, in every country you have in the world. And take a traverse of all, I could sit here and spend the next 2 hours from the way back in Latin America, download every goddamn thing. You will see that they're always there. Even in the US, they are there. In the UK, they are there. Look, Boris Johnson just quit a couple of days ago. And don't forget, he said, I'm being witch hunted and I'm going to fight back. He said, I know who are my enemy in the party, in the same Republican Party, the same Conservative Party. That tells you he was talking about some particular powers within the party. So it's, number one, it's across, and they're very, very powerful. You can't run away with that. But then the next question is, how do you deal with them? You are the president. And that is what I said, you need imagination and creativity to deal with them. Number one, as a president or as a leader of a country, as a government, you have to be transparent. That's important. You have to be above board. The problem is when you have a leadership that is compromised, there is no way you can. They say if you want to fight with the devil, you got to get a very long, fork at the end of the long spoon. I remember, I think it was President Musa Yar'Adua, of blessed memory, the one that died. He said something when he was talking about energy in the country. He said that energy was being controlled by a cabal, and that it was so difficult to fight them. I almost fainted when the president said that. That was like me. That was the president capitulating to a cabal in that country that you are the president of. So I'm not minimizing the significance of that. Again, I think one of the true things late Sonny Abacha said in his life as a military head of state in Nigeria was when he said, if an insurgency lasts more than 24 hours, then the government has a hand in it. I think that's the most important thing for me that he ever said.
Did he really say that? I've heard people say
it's been contested.
He did say that. It is. I think I'll be able to, if I'll be able to prove that.
All right.
Give you that proof. But what is important is, if you look beyond the messenger, let's even focus on that message. But that tells you, and even in the last administration, some people highly placed in government came out, including governors. We can't contest that. Who said, people who are funding Boko Haram are in these high-ranking people. Yeah. And one of the reasons why we've been told why the DSS now went after former CBN governor, Mr. Emefiele, was that he was funding, allegedly funding terrorist groups and this and that. That is, of course, is innocent until otherwise proven. But what I'm trying to say here is that shadowy powers are always very, very powerful. But if you want to engage them as a president, as a leader of a democracy, leader of a country, number one, first, you must have no skeletons in your own cupboard. Because don't forget, they are like those people you are talking about, they are like corruption. It's about protecting their interests. And I think Nuru Ribadu said, if you fight corruption, corruption will fight back. This is a very simple aphorism. So you have to be above board to be able to do that. Is the president vulnerable? Whether you are vulnerable or not will depend on number one, how you came to power. I'm not talking about a particular president. I'm talking about generally how you came to power. What deals did you do? Who did you do the deals with? Because at the end of the day, I'll give an example. I was a party to a government in Lagos State here. And when people were hoopla, when they were blaming the same president, Asiwaju, for pushing out Ambode in Lagos State and this and that and blah, blah, blah. And I told people, I reminded them, I said, make no mistake. If your sport is riding on the back of a tiger, then do not complain when you end up in his belly when the tiger is hungry, because you are the first he's going to snatch. So when you ride on the back of a tiger, you must make sure you feed that tiger to stupor, so that A, he's either never hungry, or when he's hungry, he never remembers you are even at his back.
It's
what I'm saying. You cannot approbate and reprobate at the same time. If your sport is to come to a particular thing by leaning on godfathers, godmothers, and this and that, godfathers and godmothers are going to ask you for a pound of flesh when the time comes.
Very interesting insights you're giving. And I mean, from someone who's been in the action, I'm sure a lot of people appreciate that you're speaking from a place of knowledge and real experience. Quite a number of issues to actually pull out of. I was going to ask a question, but you have given me questions to ask. I mean, you talked about the CBN governor, for example. There's been a court order which is being contested. Why is the DSS arresting him? So in terms of procedure, that is being questioned, because I know you mentioned that about the shadow or skeletons in cupboard. Again, some will say, well, the current president has had his own fair share of question marks still hanging on his head. So that's another thing. But let's go to the speech, because we can spend 2 hours on that one. And look, the president, particularly spoke about Nigerians making more sacrifices for our country. And I imagine a lot of Nigerians listening to him and thinking, wait a minute, I think past 30 years has been 30 years of sacrifices. Just how much more sacrifices can we make as a nation? But don't forget, he talked about poverty. At this rate, over 100 million Nigerians are in multidimensional poverty. Some will say that is enough sacrifice. But he also promised that your sacrifice will not be in vain. And I wonder, how believable is that? Because for a lot of people, they might be thinking, we can't take any more of this. So really, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, look, thanks for that. That was very important. I'm trying to rein myself in, because I spent time on this platform talking about the fact that, I think that was during the campaign and the election. I said, look, I believe that President Asiwaju will come in with a lot of experience, and he's been there before. And I always tell people, just permit me to make that reference, that in one particular aspect, I think he has achieved something as a politician of this level that Chief Awolowo never achieved, and that was being able to work across almost everybody across the country. He built bridges across the country, which is very important, number one, in terms of your credibility, in terms of legitimacy, but more importantly, in terms of your ability to deliver. Because, and I'm happy you mentioned that when you were talking, he didn't just ask us for sacrifice, and that's important. Sacrifice to what? To give more to the country that we've been giving, that we've not seen the result. But then he went ahead to reel out what will be our benefit. In essence, what he did, he said, I am my government. It's a pact. President Asiwaju today promised Nigeria, entered into a contract with Nigerians within 17 minutes on national television, that I shall fulfill every mandate, everything that we campaigned on. So
but is this justiciable? Forgive me for butting. Yeah. How justiciable is this? I mean, we've had pacts, we've had promises. Yes. In fact, if we were to compile all of those promises, yes, we'll have volume. So how? I
agree with you, Kayode. I agree entirely, and that's why I said that because Nigeria will suffer from trust deficit, we have become suspicious of everything, and we can't blame ourselves for it. But what I'm saying is that somebody came in, and within 24 hours took two important steps, albeit maybe one is still complete, which is subsidy that we almost all agree had been very fraudulent, and for 24 years other presidents were not able to do that. He did that. Boom. Second one is the disparate exchange rates.
It's still disparate.
It's still disparate, but there is move, we know, in terms of, and initially there was rumor that there was going to be, and I
parity.
think,
and the CBN debunked that is,
I mean, for me, that should already show that I should start, if I'm doubting the president before, or the government before, I think what the president is asking Nigeria is that, look at what we've done in the last 2 weeks, and let's see whether we can begin to give us a benefit of the doubt. I think that is very important. I don't think President Shiwaju expects Nigerian to simply say, oh yes, we've taken you on, okay, we agree with everything you say. But no, but we are saying, you know what? It's a new government. So far, they've taken some steps, and we are saying, let us be cautiously optimistic that everything he says, the government will stick to. But at least he is giving Nigerians something that they can hang on to. Look, all we can hang on to is hope.
You know, Mr. Abass, I wonder if what the president has said is enough to hang on to, you know, considering the fact that Nigerians have had a lot to, you know, bear in the last 8 years of the administration, particularly in the last 4 years. The Naira redesign, Nigerians groaned beneath that weight. And, you know, inflation from 2015, that was 9%, is over 22% now. And following the increase in the pump price of petrol to 500 naira per litre, inflation is bound to, you know, go up yet again, and there are no immediate solutions beyond what the president has promised in terms of words. So can we begin to look at, you know, a possibility where the political class itself should be the ones, you know, making the sacrifices? Can the president, as a Democrat himself, urge the political class to make sacrifices in terms of, you know, their remuneration? The other day, Chief Afefa Babalola was asking, you know, valid questions about why the political class, the former governors, should be going away with severance packages to the tune of millions of naira.
Yeah, look, Bukola, your question is double-edged. You know, I agree entirely that we cannot just take what President has said on the face value. We can't hang to his words. And that's why I said that I don't think he's even asking us to hang on to his words. But he's telling us we've done this. We've removed the subsidy. Just yesterday, was it yesterday or 2 days ago, when they increased the retirement age of judges and this and that.
Friday.
Which is Thursday. Which is really commendable in terms of. I think that's why I say I think what the president is saying is that we're not just speaking here. Look at what we have done in a very short time, and we're inviting you to trust us more and give us your support for us to be able to do more. Now, whether the president or his government can then get that what he requests from Nigerians then depends on what the government does as we go on. So that is, you know, one leg of the. And then second part of your question,
the political class.
Was the political class. That's a very important question. We have a very, very, you know, overly weighty, overly big government of all structures. You don't want to know how much members of House of Representatives and Senate, how much they are earning. And you have 1 billion, you know, people that, hundreds of thousands of political jobbers that you don't really, you can do without in some circumstances. So I don't think it's not an either or situation. All those people you are talking about also, they are part of Nigerians anyway that are going to make the sacrifice.
But the question, Mr. Abass, is what percentage are they compared to the number of Nigerians suffering?
Those people will make two levels of sacrifices here. The sacrifice they make as general Nigerians and the sacrifice they must make as political office holders. Because I did talk about the president's ability to be able to carry the country forward depends largely on his own legitimacy and credibility. How he's perceived. When I say I as the president, I'm talking about him and his government as a whole. That is the executive, the legislature, judiciary. How the government is able to convince people that take a look at us. Take a look at the kind of sacrifice we are making at our own level. So we are not telling Nigerians to make the sacrifices while we are, you know, living large and we are doing things like that. When people are going on in convoys of 500 cars, 20 million cars and this and that, the country will be looking at you and thinking, what is going on? When you have policemen who should be serving public, when you have like 5 or 6 of them attached to a single member of parliament, Nigerians are asking themselves, what kind of sacrifice am I making? These are people who should be looking after malls and kiosks and shops and patrolling our roads to reduce crime rates on our street. So what I'm saying in essence is that the president realizes, and I think he recognizes, the fact that Nigerians have been asked for too many times with no result to show for it. And I think that was why he immediately went on a limbo to say, look, for doing this, we are going to develop infrastructure, education, transportation, and this and that. Because he knew at that point in time that Nigeria will be asking, why are we going to be sacrificing again? But I think...
So is it legit? Will we be calling on RAMFAC now, you know, to make a reduction in the salaries and allowances of the executive, i.e. the, executive and the legislature?
Well, the executive, the president can do. The legislature, he cannot. in any democracy, the legislatures fix their own. They are going to pass the bill. They fix their own remuneration. However, it is up to the electorate to put the legislature in, and that, I think, TV stations like channel station should be able to lead that discourse. And sometimes, it's a very important question. You can generate this for people to discuss. Let the CSO discuss it. Let the people discuss it. Because when you have respected, media houses, that are popular. I'm not talking about populist media houses. That difference between a popular and a populist. I won't go into that. That you have a solidity in your credibility. You can lead. You can channel certain discourses in the country and say, look, shouldn't we start talking about remuneration that legislators themselves get? Because the executive will have no power over that. However, those who elect those legislators can start claiming that, you know what, we are going through hell on our own. If you are my representative, I want you to begin to champion that in your house to reduce. Let's even begin by saying all legislators, whether your House of Representatives, publish what you earn. Let's know what you earn. When I was in Lagos, I was a member of cabinet in Lagos State. My salary was published across. My salary was about 130,000 naira per month. But then you had all the perks, the newspaper allowance, this allowance, that allowance. Everything bumped it up to about 800 or 700,000 naira per month. And if you must know, I left a $14,000 job in my previous life, because I believe I wanted to contribute to my society. That was my own sacrifice at the end of the day. So what I'm saying is that nothing stops constituents from calling on their representatives. Do you mind publishing what you earn, so I can engage?
You're still putting it at their whim, so to speak, because RAMFAC, for instance, as you mentioned, is a product of the law. Yeah. Now, you also said the National Assembly fixes their own, so it's not something that is debated. Who will take the lead in ensuring that the members of the National Assembly do the needful that many people are talking about? This conversation we are having is not new. It's 24 years old, what legislators earn in Nigeria. So who should take the lead in that regard? Professor Chief Afebalola has made his own comment, and that's not the first time we're having it. CSOs have said the same thing. So who takes the lead?
Well, there should be a concerted effort. I talked about credible media houses working with CSOs. Let's have a national debate about it. You see, we can talk about these things individually. If there is no critical mass, if there's no consensus other than, as lawyers call, if there's no meeting of the mind across board, the CSOs, the media, and let's force a national discussion. Look, what we've been doing, Chief Afebalola, I have a great respect for him. We speak as an individual. It goes. We raise it like this today, it goes. Somebody raises it tomorrow, it goes. Let's take a decisive stand. And that's why I began by saying, why don't we actually begin to work with CSOs, to work with constituents? And begin, first and foremost, let constituents begin to call on, I have a right. That's a Nigerian. I can go to court and tell the court, you know what? I am being represented in this particular government by this. I want this person to produce what he or she earns. Freedom of Information Act.
Interestingly, there was this conversation was with Chief Afebalola was with trade agency, Nasima.
Yeah.
So hopefully they'll be able to do something about it. But there's something Bukola raised the other time that I'd like you to, and I think we've spoken about it peripherally. She talked about the political class. I would like to put it in the light of what Professor Olurode, who is a former INEC commissioner, said. Talked about an elite consensus. Said Nigerian elite focus on irrelevant issues of governance, of who governs, and ethno-religious issues of identity politics and all of that. Now he now said it's important not to exaggerate its significance, nor equate it with the substantive issues of architecture of governance. More appearances cannot be equated with substance. So this elite consensus, political class as Bukola put it, how do we aggregate them? They're listening now. They watch the prominent popular media houses, as you put it. How do we aggregate them to think more about the substantive issues as opposed to the peripheral issues?
Whenever I hear questions like this, the first thing that shoots through my mind is there seems to be an assumption of homogeneity of that elite class. The elite class is never homogeneous in any society. We might think we are elites because we've been to universities, we are middle classers, and so on, we are informed and this and that. But you might be shocked that people who have not been to schools before, who operate in some fringes of society, who have informal education, are better elitists than So first and foremost, we have to find consensus about which elites are we talking about. If you talk about the political class, political elites, then you are in trouble, because you are asking them to commit a harakiri. I'm sure you know what a harakiri is. It's a suicide for them to plan their own sword and then fall on it. They are only going to talk about things that will benefit them. You're never going to ask, you're never going to get those elites talk about things that are relevant that is not relevant to them, relevant to you and I. And that is why you cannot get 10 parliamentarians today to talk about their salaries. They're not going to participate in that discussion at all. And I think you remember, I'm sure you know a particular senator in this country who first of all bailed the cat, so to say, about how much actually they were getting. And you know, as they say, where that one landed the gentleman today, who has become more proficient on Twitter and stuff like that. Than, you know, what I'm saying is that he paid in quote, he paid a price for that, because he was almost ostracized by his own circle.
And it's quite interesting. We're winding down. We have less than a minute, but it's quite interesting how you now see people picking it up from there. It looks like it just happened and people moved on, as it were, because we have other things to face. You know, bigger fish to fry, as they say in Nigeria. But as we wind down, some will say we've been in a time freeze for 30 years. Hope. Renewed hope. The president literally spent most of his speech referring to things that happened then. Is there any similarity between both men? Are we seeing another MKO of sorts?
Well, I think, you know, well, as Democrats, I think there is a similarity between MKO and President Tinubu. But, you know, in terms of message of hope, obviously, I think Abiola's message was hope. 93 at that point in time, he embodied that vision. And of course, the president himself was one of those who actually spearheaded the whole. So there's no surprise that there is a kind of a similarity in their messages and also in their understanding of where we are. But in terms of going forward, look, and again, that's why I keep on saying that I think Nigeria, I would say very cautiously, I would say that I think Nigeria has the best, at this moment, the best shot at beginning to lay proper foundation for democracy. Mark my word, I'm not saying that we are going to go to El Dorado, no. But I think we have the best chance now of beginning to lay the proper foundations for democracy. And I think if anything that has gone in the last 3 weeks of this government, or 2 weeks since May 29, is anything to go by, I think we can begin to say, well, maybe, just maybe, there is really a silver lining, you know, at the end of our tunnel.
Well, there are those who would also say it depends on whose interest you are speaking about. Precisely. But we have to leave it at that for now. Professor Ademola Abass, Professor of International Law, Global Affairs Analyst, former Special Advisor to Lagos State Governor on Overseas Affairs and Investment. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
My pleasure. Sacrifice the $14,000.
Thank you very much for having me.
Is it okay to say Happy Democracy Day to you?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Definitely. Thank you.
All right, we're back after now to take on other issues. To stay with us.